back to Ask Steve Judd. I'm Sue Brain, and today I'm going to be asking Steve Judd about all the big planets, the outer planets are going to be going retrograde, and some of them already are, and that's going to be including Chiron on the 1st of August. So Steve, I guess this retrograde energy is going to be affecting us all, certainly globally, but also personally. So how do you anticipate this playing out?
Let me ramble for a couple of minutes, Sue. Let's define what retrogrades actually are, first of all. Retrograde planets occur when, with exception of Mercury and Venus, which we'll come to in a minute, a planet can only be retrograde when it is on the opposite side of the sky from the Earth to the Sun. So it's moving in the same direction as the Earth, but in a slower way. So the Earth is overtaking it on the inside lap. So it appears against the backdrop of the stars to behind it that the planet is moving backwards. It's not, it's just not moving as fast forward as the Earth. It's like being on two trains and you're in an express train overtaking a commuter train going in the same direction, which appears to be going backwards.
Yes.
Mercury and Venus can go retrograde a lot more easily because they're inside the Earth's orbit. So when they're on one side of the sun as opposed to the other, and they're just about to go behind the sun, they appear to be moving backwards if we could see them, which we can't because the sun's in the way. When a planet is retrograde, it's my experience that the influences of those planets during its retrograde period generally tend to work more internally rather than externally. But when a planet is about to go retrograde, there'll be a set of influences and effects and circumstances. And then the planet will go retrograde, during which time the individual will get a period of time to reflect, reassess, reevaluate, reconsider. And then the planet will move forward again, and then they can repeat the actions more successfully or correct what they did wrong the first time. So, and obviously some planets are retrograde a lot longer than others, depending on how far away from the sun they are. What's really unusual about recent years is that just in the last decade or two, for perhaps the first time in a long time, many hundreds of years, we've had Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all in the same quadrant of the sky. So they've all been going retrograde at around the same time. Now Jupiter's beginning to move forward again, away from that quadrant. But, you know, we've still got Neptune, Pluto, Saturn, Chiron in a couple of days, all retrograde at the moment. Uranus will go retrograde in a month or so. Jupiter won't go retrograde now for another sort of I think it's mid-November. But yeah, we're in retrograde season. And of course, Mercury's just about to go retrograde. That's a whole different story, Mercury retrograde.
Can I just jump in with a question here, which I'm always struggling with? The fact that it isn't true, the fact it isn't actually, I mean, it's against physics for planets to go backwards.
Of course.
How does this play out in our lives? It has to be archetypal energy or something like that, because it isn't a physical possibility.
It isn't a physical possibility, of course not. You can't change the planet's orbits, which is why astrology is so wonderfully objective. You don't get retrogrades in a heliocentric chart. You only get retrogrades in a geocentric chart when you put yourself or the planet Earth in the middle of a horoscope. When you're doing it from a solar perspective, with the sun in the middle of the horoscope, you never get retrogrades because planets don't move backwards. But it's only because the Earth is spinning around the sun faster than, say, Jupiter or Saturn. So as the Earth goes round the quadrant of the sun and starts to disappear behind the sun, we look at Jupiter, and it appears to be moving backwards. And of course, it's apparent, it's not real. And it's a perceived moving backwards. So it's not real, it's perception. But during the time where it appears to be moving backwards, it does seem as if this is a time for reflection. and reassess an internal development rather than external development. That's the way I call it.
I think this is what fascinates me so much about astrology is that there is this sort of sense of archetypal energy that the imprint that we pick up, and it works. And I know lots and lots of people who experience retrograde Mercury, and it really does affect them. It doesn't affect a lot of people, but it certainly affects some people. Or when you're born with retrograde Jupiter, for example, that you're more inclined to have your own belief system and step out of the traditional belief system for your own. Or Saturn is about, retrograde Saturn. You can often have a very strong disrespect for authority. And I'm just fascinated by that.
It's interesting when you find people born with a lot of retrogrades in their chart.
Yes.
They seem to be less, it's not about being proactive or reactive, but people born with a lot of retrogrades, they're not going to be so gung-ho and directly proactive in terms of making things happen all the time. They're going to go, oh, okay, this opportunity's happened to me. I can do this now. Let's just stop for a few hours and think about it. Whereas people born with only one or two retrogrades or none will go, okay, this has happened, right, let's do it. Boom.
Yeah. And I just,
So,
and also just to say also, if you're born with a lot of retrograde of the outer planets, sometimes I feel like people feel out of step with their generational expectation or energy or something like that. They don't quite relate to it. Would you agree with that?
I would certainly, but I would add that because of the vagaries of the times we're all collectively being born in, where all the bigger outer planets have been in the same area of the sky, that people born with a lot of retrogrades, for example, in recent years, it's primarily Cancer, Leo, and Virgo people who are going to be getting the outer planets retrograde at the same time in their birth charts,
Yes.
because, well, that's just celestial mechanics. Consequently, a lot of people who are alive today, if they're going to have lots of retrogrades, they're all going to have them in one or two consecutive houses. And that's fascinating to me, because it means that certain specific areas of life, as denoted by the house that the retrograde is in, are going to be really heavily influenced, and they're going to be a lot more introspective in the affairs of that house,
Yes.
opposed to the
Yes.
other houses where they're much more outgoing.
Absolutely. So in fact, any retrograde, or let any retrograde planet that you have in whatever house that's in, you will be more reflective about that subject or that theme of your life. For instance, let's say it's retrograde in, oh, I don't know, the fourth house. There is something about becoming more introverted around or more reflective around family issues, or actually in the unconscious, because the fourth house is also to do with the unconscious, or what we are most unconscious of. So would you say that is true?
I would. And I can give you a classic example using my own chart. When I was born, the only two retrogrades I had were both Saturn and Neptune, which were retrograde in my second house. And I spent 40 years in debt,
Yes.
constantly worrying about money. And it was only as I got into my late 50s, early 60s, that I thought, well, wait a minute. Somehow I've always put food on the table, clothes on my back, roof over my head, and I've always had a little bit of cash in my pocket. And I stopped worrying about money. It stopped being such a big issue for me. At
Yeah.
which point I started making money.
But that's really is Saturn retrograde in the second, isn't it?
Yeah, along with Neptune, because
Oh, with Neptune slipping out through your fingers.
yeah, absolutely.
Fascinating.
So that's just an example, but it could easily be, as you say, in any house where you just sort of fret about it and then you give up on it and then it works.
Yes. Yes.
Are you familiar with Serena Rowley Dougal?
Not yet.
She's the first person in the world to get a PhD in parapsychology. And she wrote the seminal book Where Science and Magic Meet.
I know the book.
Right,
Yeah.
that's Serena. And
Okay.
she called it the release of effort effect, where you try and try and try and nothing happens. And then you think, ah, sod it. And
Mhm.
you let go. And all of a sudden it happens.
Yes,
And that's a well-known phenomena.
it
I do
is.
associate that with retrogrades.
Yes, that's such an interesting thing. Do you know what I was thinking about the retrogrades? This sort of the more inner focus. It sort of matches the cycle of the moon, the waning moon cycle, which is when we're born in a waning moon cycle, we're more reflective than when we're born into a waxing moon phase. And I feel like that kind of matches up somehow.
I think there's analogies there, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, Also, because the outer planets from Jupiter out are retrograde for a long period of time. Yeah, Jupiter's going to be retrograde for 3.5 months a year. Saturn will be retrograde for four and a bit months a year. Uranus will be retrograde for over 5 months. And Neptune and Pluto will be retrograde for something like 24, 25 weeks a year.
Mm.
So you can't say that half of a whole year's worth of people born with Neptune or with Pluto retrograde are going to have particular characteristics which you can attribute to the retrograde position of that planet.
Yes.
And neither can you say that those people will work better when Pluto is retrograde if it's retrograde in their chart, because it's half of the
Yeah.
population of a planet.
Yeah.
You can say that with Mercury, Venus, and Mars retrograde. When people are born on a Mercury, Venus, and Mars retrograde, I often find for my clients that these people will then be more effective when Mercury, Venus, or Mars is retrograde in the sky. If it's retrograde in their chart, they'll identify it with it more and they'll
Yeah.
get more done than they would under normal circumstances.
It's matching the energy. It's holding the
Yeah.
energy. Absolutely. Uh,
And the Venus retrograde phenomenon is just such a beautiful example of celestial mechanics, because as I'm sure you know, but maybe other people don't, Venus goes retrograde 5 times every 8 years, and every 8 years it repeats its cycle less about a quarter of a degree. So over a very long period of time, you get an absolutely perfect pentagram
yeah.
appearing in the heavens
Yeah.
of Venus retrograde. It's called the Dance of Venus, and it's
Yeah. And it's the star. The flower. I call it the flower. Actually, I just think
mm,
it's such a. And anybody just look it up on internet. It is a wonderful phenomena to actually understand that that's what Venus provides for us. Yet more beauty.
yes. And then, of course, how what I find fascinating is how Mercury retrograde, not so much the events or the influences or anything to do with the actual transit, but the actual words Mercury retrograde have entered modern lexicology in recent years. Now you're finding stand-up comedians going on stage going, yeah, I couldn't get this to, I don't know, must be Mercury retrograde. And you'll find
Yeah.
20% of the audience will crack up laughing because they'll identify with it. And the rest
Yeah.
will go, what? What's
Yeah.
that? But it's becoming more common.
It is. Well, the language of astrology is entering everyday life.
Oh, yeah.
No question.
I know. And a few people are getting very irritated by it, but hey, I
But
love
it's
it.
true, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
absolute. It is. That's exactly what's happening. I'm what I'm curious about is with all at the moment. I mean, wow! Since we were last together 3 weeks ago, quite a lot has happened in the world out there.
Oh, a little bit.
Little
Yeah.
bit here, a little bit there. And I'm just wondering how all these the how you feel that all these the big planets going retrograde synchronistically at the moment, especially after the Uranus Mars conjunction and what that has brought into the world. How do you feel that that might play out globally?
Well, Uranus Mars Algol thing was the same day or within 24 hours of that attempted assassination.
Right.
And
And the outage.
the full moon was
Oh, the full
within
moon was the
24
outage.
hours of Biden stepping down. And the outage was just as Mercury went square to Uranus, starting in its retrograde shadow. That's
Yeah.
going to continue now for for 6 weeks. So I don't think that's over yet.
No.
The fallout from it isn't over because all of a sudden, a third of the world's computers stopped working like that. One stroke of code, one bit of code, one letter put in the wrong way, or one stroke put in the wrong way, forward slash, backward slash. A third of the world's computers stopped working. Now, that tells me what a frail
Yes.
system we have. And
Yeah.
that's why I think we're going to sort of the smart money is, as you may know, I've recently become very good friends with my friends Chat GPT and AI. And I can seriously see a future where the future computing world is not going to be just purely technological. I can say, I know this is going to terrify a lot of people. And I know a lot of people don't like this, but I can see a future where there's going to be some type of interface between the bioware and the techware.
Yes. Yes.
And we've already got that where people have implants in their brain who are epileptic or who can't walk so that they can think themselves healthy, they can think themselves mobile again, and it appears to work.
Mm.
So this is just the very first step. But I can see a situation where we can, it's not quite downloading consciousness. Maybe that's a long way away. I hope it is. But
Wow. I mean, ooh, that's something else to think about.
if the
Mm.
global temperatures keep escalating as they are, and they're going to, let's
Oh,
face it.
yeah.
I'm not attributing blame because then I'm stepping into a minefield. Fact to facts, face to facts. Global temperatures are accelerating out of all records, breaking records
Yeah.
daily now. So the future, our bodies are not designed for this. So there's going to have to be some type of change at the genetic level. And that will either happen through natural mutation or through technological and genetic enhancement, which is a scary prospect.
Mm.
But what else? What other options are there?
Well,
We're not
that's
going to turn the climate temperature back down.
no, and that's what Pluto is going to bring into our consciousness, isn't it? That whole concept of moving into Aquarius. Like I think once Pluto goes into Aquarius, I think it's in just very early December.
Yeah,
I I think we're just going to get bombarded with new technologies.
yeah.
It'll
It's
be
already happening,
mind-blowing.
huh?
It'd be mind-blowing.
Yeah, and particularly over the next couple of years, with that big lineup in the skies. And I know that Neptune and Saturn are going to be together, and perhaps we can do something on that another time.
Yeah,
But
yes.
the Uranus-Pluto trine, Uranus at the start of Gemini, trining Pluto at the start of Aquarius, that is an awesome prospect. That just fills me with hope. Certainly involving new software and new hardware, but
Yes.
also in terms of opening us up to new ideas around community and tribal interaction.
Well,
So yeah,
yes.
it's
I mean,
very
that
hopeful.
I think the whole concept of sort of the top-down authority, that's going to go. I can imagine a lot of people wanting to create just very localized communities, and they would be wanting inverted commas self-governing. I can imagine
Already beginning.
it's
Yeah.
absolutely. I read a fascinating article about a woman who she bought a container, a ship container.
Saw
She
it this morning. Yeah.
put it on a piece of land, and now she's turning that into her. She wants to grow vegetables and all sorts of things, start a market garden. And I can see that. I mean, more and more people going, I want to do that.
Yeah. So could I. It's
It's
it's it's it's
fantastic.
it's beginning to pick up.
Yes.
Um, and I think that the kickback against this is that the imposed structures, what I call the dominator culture of the
Hmm.
last 1,000 years, whether it be political, economic, or particularly religious, are now realizing that their time is over, and they're
Well,
fighting like hell against it.
yeah, and I think that's going to massively shift when Neptune goes into Aries. I think
Yeah.
that's going to be a major shift of what our belief systems, how we want to, how we're not going to be so sort of at the mercy of other people's belief systems. I think it's going to go.
Yes.
There's going to be new religion, inverted commas, religious thoughts or spiritual understanding, and it could be then. A lot of people are talking about this, a shift of consciousness in humanity. It could be that that's when it starts to really kick off.
It started, and astrology is on the cutting edge of that wave.
Yes,
That's
yes.
why astrology is to quote, what was it? I made this saying up a few years ago. It's the astrology is the lingua franca of the emerging consciousness revolution. It's the
Right.
language which everyone can
Yes,
speak.
yes, yeah.
It's the new Esperanto.
Absolutely. So I just want to go back to all of these outer planets going retrograde, including Chiron at the moment. So my vision of that is like this massive energetic wave is going backwards to go.
Yes,
Or
that's a
go,
really nice analogy. Yeah,
yeah,
when you see the wave hit the sand and then it comes back,
yes,
and you hear the
yeah,
sound of the water receding over
yeah,
the pebbles, and then
yeah,
you know that another wave's going to come in and
yeah,
crash in.
and crash in, and then we go, oh, okay, off we go again.
Yeah, and that's where the surfboard comes in. You either surf it or you get spun all over the place and crashed on the rocks.
Yes, and I think that's something that we really have to sort of start working with more and more, is how do we deal with the chaotic feelings that we're having, or feeling completely out in a world that we feel is out of control, and how can astrology help us to do that?
So you saying that's just fired off a lot of new neurons. Um, we're not going to be able to adapt to the developing chaos using the same structures and systems, both mentally, individually and collectively, that we've done so far, because we're heading into the unknown. So it'd be easy to say, okay, we're going to have to abandon 2000 years of imposed thought patterns and emotional patterns and just trust our instinct. But that actually means taking a step back to just into sort of shamanic or animalistic side, which is nice in theory, but actually not really that practical for maintaining a civilized culture. So
Yeah,
instead, we're going to have to integrate the ideas of working back with our basic instinct, as well as using the advanced technological and mental skills that we've learned just in the last 30 or 40 years. 30 years ago, who had heard of the internet? 30 years
yeah,
ago. Who had an
absolutely.
email?
Yes. Who had a mobile phone?
Look how fast we've come in such a short space of
Absolutely
time.
incredible.
This is an accelerating graph
Yeah.
curve, and we're about a prime vertical. So what
Yes.
happens when a graph hits prime vertical? You either collapse in and it break down, and you spend another 10,000, 12,000 years going back the other way, becoming more right-brained instead of left, or you go outside the parameters of the graph. You exceed the
Well, you
parameters of the graph.
explode outward, don't you, into
And
whoa,
that's when we go into a more multidimensional
what
consciousness.
factor eight? What was it? What factor did they go to when they went off? I can't remember, or 13 or something, but it's got that warp factor, hasn't it?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very exciting time to be alive.
Scary and
Very
exciting.
scary. Very scary. But without, we wouldn't be human if we weren't frightened of, I mean, because we're frightened of the unknown, we're frightened of dying, we're frightened of the big change, of course, of losing everything that we've had and understand and feel comfortable with. Of course we're scared.
But that fear is equally matched by the exhilaration and hope
Yeah,
for the future.
yeah,
So it's going to happen. So you either get on board and enjoy the ride, or you try and put the brakes on, and that's going to be pretty difficult for everyone.
Well, you're just going to be dragged along behind the car. Do you know what I mean? It sort of feels like you're just going to be dragged along whether you want to or not. And I'd rather be in the car, driving it, going where I'm going, rather than being dragged along behind it.
I'd rather be on the roof.
Watching things go on.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Steve, is there
Exciting
anything?
times.
Yeah, is there anything else you'd like to say about retrogrades before we bring this to a close?
Yeah, Mercury's about to go retrograde. It goes retrograde on the 4th of September, and then it will stay retrograde till about the 25th, and then the shadow won't clear until 4th of August to the 25th of August, and then it won't shift it out of its shadow until mid-September. So anybody who's watching this who knows their chart, you need to look at the area between, I think it's between about 21 degrees of Leo and 4 degrees of Virgo. Might be 17 Leo to 4 degrees of Virgo, and see what house it's in, and know that that's where the retrograde's coming up over the next 4 to 6 weeks. So don't make any major changes, of course, in the areas of that house over the next 6 weeks.
Yeah,
See how the land lies in 6 weeks' time.
just be aware of how you communicate with other people.
Yeah,
Yeah, really important.
yeah.
Okie dokie. Well, what again? Love the conversation, and we'll see everyone next time.
Yeah.